Hi, everybody. Welcome to the It Hurts to Mom podcast. I'm Lauren Rose, and today we're talking about healing after abortion. And our guest is Cassie Hutton. She's someone who has a heart to help women heal. She's an author and the host of the Barefoot Parenting Podcast, the AR Foot Parenting Podcast. She'll tell you more about all of that later on. So, Cassie, let's just start at the top. Share your story with us. What did your life look like back when you made this decision, and why did you make this decision and when?
Yeah, well, first of all, thank you so much for having me on and just allowing me to share my story and allowing me to just share the love of Christ and what He's done in my life. So, yeah, back whenever I made this decision, I was a young teenager. I was naive. I was longing for love, like
Mhm.
many daughters that grow up without a father figure in their life. We're just looking to fulfill love. That's what we're really all longing for. And relationship, that's how God has created us and made us. And so at 17, I found myself in a relationship with a guy that didn't live anywhere near my hometown. I rodeoed a lot whenever I was younger and grew up riding horses and barrel racing and stuff. And so I never really wanted to date anyone in my hometown.
Mm.
Um, and so I was dating this guy that I had met, at some of the youth rodeos, and um, we both had the same wounds. Let me just kind of put it that way. He was raised by his father, but yet had father wounds. And so put those two culminating factors together, and you have the perfect scenario for two young people to make very stupid decisions.
Right.
And that's what we did. We were sexually active, and this was already wasn't my first partner, if you will. And so we kind of actually, you know this has always been the hardest part for me to admit as part of my story, is that I found myself, like, agreeing to get pregnant so that we could have this fairy tale life together and be together,
Mhm.
and, all the things that, um, I guess really Satan just comes to you and lies to you about, really, is what it is. You just believe this lie. And so, I did. I found myself pregnant at the summer before going into my senior year of high school. And, I don't know, just still so checked out from reality of what that really meant, I guess. And I was taking summer classes at a college nearby at the time. And I even went through, I don't remember what the assignment was, but I remember researching, like, what is an abortion? What really does it entail? And writing a paper on all the details of it, and the instruments that they use and how powerful that they are, and but then still making the final decision that I could go get an abortion.
Mm.
And um, so I don't even remember how we really came to that decision or how the appointment was even made. I remember going to Dallas, and this guy lived closer to Dallas. And so, you know, um, my mom allowed it and went and stayed a couple of nights at his house, and his dad allowed it. And I remember his dad driving us to the abortion clinic. I remember having to have a password to get in that day. There was an officer, like a security guard, standing outside the door to enter into the Planned Parenthood, like, waiting room. And the password for that day was hamburger. You had to have the password in order to get in. That's how I guess they knew
Oh.
you had actually made an appointment and talked to someone on the inside. And I just remember sitting there. I was really, still again, just very naive and just clueless as to what kinds of people chose abortion,
Mhm.
what their story would be. And I remember sitting there in that waiting room, looking around and seeing people with wedding rings on their hands,
Mhm.
in particular, a black couple. They both had wedding rings on their hands, and a man and a woman. And I was so baffled at that, like, you know, how, what, um, how and what got them to that situation. I had never considered that a married couple would actually choose abortion. And I remember seeing young girls walk in completely, walk back to the back. Just like a regular doctor's office, you are in the waiting room and then they call your name and you go back there completely sober minded. And then I would see the same girl walk out. I mean, just in the clouds. Clearly, they
Mm,
had, given her some sort of a drug to help her deal with whatever decision she had
sure.
made. And so, sure enough, that's what was offered to me when I got back there and made the decision to follow through. And, they have to by law. Well, it's been, gosh, it's been so long. I mean, it's been almost 15, 16, 17 years. I'd have to count the years up. So I'm trying to think what the law actually was at that time. But they're supposed to have to show you the ultrasound of your baby. Um,
Mm,
they did do an ultrasound, but it was not, like, here is your baby. Look at your baby. This
right.
is what we are fixing to take from your womb. But I did see the baby out of the corner of my eye and, tried to just ignore it and turn my head. Even seeing the baby on the screen or at least out of the corner of my eye and following through with all of it, that still didn't change my mind. And, for some women it does. I've heard so many
Mhm,
testimonies of women actually being in the abortion clinic and then they see their baby and they're like, they run out of that place, as fast as they can. One lady I know, she had twins. And when she saw the twins on the screen,
mm,
they're alive and well today because she made the decision to keep her babies. But I did not. I followed through with the abortion and it really didn't affect me for a couple of months. And, for some women, I'm going to say this lightheartedly. It doesn't, if you can see me on screen, I have air
mm,
quotes up, but like it doesn't affect them. But it affects every single person and it affects every single relationship that you have when you make the decision to abort your baby. In essence, you are killing your baby, whether you agree with that or not. It's ultimately, in God's hands. And God is the author of life. And although we have to physically participate in some sort of physical act to create a baby, then we are still, it's still God who's the author of that child's life. And he knew that baby before he ever, knit us together in the womb. And gave that baby a name, gave that baby a personality, gave that baby a calling. Um, and so when we choose to take that child's life, we're taking something that was most precious to God. And, in the the world loves to, I guess, argue for rape and incest and things like that. And by all means, I cannot imagine being in a mother's shoes who has been raped and then finds herself pregnant. And I remember one time sitting at my desk and thinking on things. And I thought about Mary, the mother of Jesus. And it was like I heard the Holy Spirit say, newsflash, newsflash. And it was like, I heard him say, like, Mary was a teenage mother
mm,
who who did not choose to participate in a physical act to get pregnant. She wasn't raped. There wasn't a trauma there. But in a sense, there was a trauma because in Jewish culture, she could have been stoned to death. She could, she was, her husband could have very easily thrown her out to the wolves. All of the things could have been done to her. So it was traumatic in the sense that culture, it was against cultural norm and she was ostracized. But yet her heart said, I will do it, whatever your will, and she accepted that call to have the Messiah, to birth the Messiah here on earth. And so when you look at Mary as the mother of Jesus and you think about her faith in that moment, none of us have an excuse because she didn't choose that pregnancy either, but she accepted it once she encountered, you know, the living God. Moving on, though, it was a few months after the abortion that I really began to like have a lot of just, I wouldn't say I had nightmares, but I just was tormented at night. It was very hard for me to fall asleep just thinking about everything. I would just experience a lot of the physical sensations again, be drawn back into all of it. Really, really, really had a hate for doctors and anyone in the medical field at all, and just really could take my anger out on them very easily. And then also, just anger towards my mom, anger towards a lot of people, and then it just escalated my relationship towards guys, and just needing to fulfill that void, especially at night because I hated to be alone at night. I started sleeping with the TV on, the lights on, and just in a place of real fear, a lot of fear, a lot of loneliness. So, but to fast forward and not give any more credit to the darkness, right? Jesus was faithful and so forgiving in my life. And so my track to healing after abortion actually looks quite a bit different than a lot of women. A lot of women come to Jesus or they already knew Jesus and they still chose an abortion. They just didn't have that heart revelation. And they'll deal with abortion being a Christian for a long time and never think that that abortion is affecting them until God begins to start peeling back the layers slowly and delicately. But for me, that was actually the exact point that God took me to while I was at a women's retreat. I was not a Christian, but I was going to church. I had two young boys at the time. My youngest was 9 months and my oldest was or sorry, he was 11 months, and then my oldest was a year and 11 months. So, they're only a year apart. And so when, I'm at this women's retreat and there was just this question that kinda came up, like, "When have you been the loneliest?" That was, like, the question. We was talking about loneliness and I didn't really recognize it at the time, but the Holy Spirit was just really ministering to my heart on that loneliness and taking me back to that place as a 17-year-old girl in my bed at night and just being tormented all alone, feeling like I had no one to talk to, feeling like, no one understood where I was coming from, the shame and the hiddenness of an abortion. I didn't want anyone to know about it, although it seemed like the whole entire high school did know about it. And just really uh, dealing with, I couldn't even listen to the word abortion. If I heard that word, just send me into almost like a, a the fetal position of just like, and
Mm.
like not being able to come out of it mentally and just thinking on all the things. And so then a lady just encouraged me to pray really about my salvation and am I really saved and do I really know Jesus? And it was very it was not threatening or, it was just like, hey, just pray and ask the Lord. And I really believed that God would speak to me. I had always believed that God spoke. I had always believed in the power of God, and I had always believed that He was a miraculous God that could do miraculous things. And so, as I sat there praying, I heard the audible voice of God say, "Go share your testimony." And that was also the title of a breakout session. And so it kind of has multiple
Mhm.
meanings and layers at this point. So I got up out of my chair and I remember going, like, there was a long line of ladies trying to sign up for these breakout sessions. And I mean, I just walked up to the front of the line and just boom, switched my name from what I thought I was going to how to share your testimony. And I remember looking at these ladies and they were like, I just don't know which breakout session to go to, And I'm like, well, God will speak. Like, what are
Mhm.
y'all waiting on? I mean, I had just encountered the audible voice, and it's the very first time I had ever heard God speak. And so it was extremely powerful. And I went back and sat down and started to pray again. And this time I had a vision and I heard the spirit of the Lord, but it was still, although it wasn't audible, it was still just as crisp and clear. And I heard the Lord, I had a vision of change just break in the spirit. I just exactly like the image that you see probably on Google.
Mhm.
These chains break and the one in the middle just shatters. And I heard the Lord say, "Because I have forgiven you, you must forgive him." And so to give a little bit of background story there, we had just finished up with a murder trial for my cousin, and her son's father had shot and killed her. And I, in my heart, had considered him a murderer, of course. And he deserved life in prison and to never see his kids again and, to never get out. I can't believe you've taken this beautiful soul from us, and now her son has no. Her son has no mother, and we're all in heartache and pain. And so I had elevated myself above him, and God in that moment just really humbled me and said, whenever he spoke those words, "Because I've forgiven you, you must forgive him," I saw myself fall to my knees in another vision, which meant humility, because the pastor a few weeks before had given this sermon about humility, and he painted this visual of it's literally as if someone falls to their knees. And so in the spirit, that's what I saw myself do. And in my heart and in my mind, I had this revelation that God loved me just as much as he loved this other man who had murdered. But not only that, I had committed murder the same way that he had committed murder. And with all of that, it's like, only a loving God can point out that you're a murderer, but yet you realize his amazing love for you all at the same time. Like, there's no rhyme or reason. I can't logically explain how all of that culminated in my heart and in my mind. But in that moment, all shame from abortion left. I knew that I had to talk about abortion. I knew that I had to let it out of my mouth and talk about it and explain to people that God loves you no matter what, and he forgives you. And yes, you have to confront your own sin and say, yeah, I murdered a child of God. And I have to ask for forgiveness. And I have to realize that Jesus died for it all. Paul was a murderer, right? We all know that. David was a murderer. David was an adulterer. That doesn't give us an excuse to go and commit those things. But if we find ourselves in that place, then we know we can come to a God who loves us and forgives us and heals our broken places. And so that was just obviously life altering for me and my whole family. I was a totally different person coming home after that. My husband, who grew up Christian, his life, we began going to church together, and now my children are raised knowing Christ. And then with that, so many things have been birthed from that. You can hear more of that story through my book called Finding Freedom. You can order it on Amazon. It's called Finding Freedom, A Personal Exodus from Deception to Identity. Because a week later, I was also delivered of the spirit of error that it talks about in 1 John chapter 4. And just a lot of things. And, healing, even though that one big culmination of healing came, there have been so many other little steps of healing along the way. And I don't think we ever get to a point where we're fully healed. There's always something, and life happens. Life is messy. Life is hard. You throw kids in the mix and your heart is given to every child that you have, plus your spouse, and, there's just always a place where God is leading us into. And if we're never in a place where we're having to constantly rely on faith, then how are we really exercising our relationship with the Lord, because without faith, it's impossible to please God. And through another trial and just things that happened, because we in that book Finding Freedom, you'll read our story. We adopted my cousin's son. So the mother that we lost, we ended up adopting her son. He was 3.5. And 5 years later, the Lord said, you have to let him go. And
Mhm.
so it was gut wrenching and very hard. And but through that came the book that I've written now, the Bible study that I've written now, and just the persecution that came with it and the not understanding. It's Jeremiah like 17:10, I think. It says that God searches the heart, but he tests the mind.
Mm.
And you know, when God said no to us for the adoption, after 5 years, it was like, that's the only thing that I know to explain it. Like, my mind didn't understand it, but my heart absolutely knew what God was saying, and so did my husband, and the fact that we were in agreement over that was like, a miracle in and of itself, and a lot of persecution, but in that, so much of our faith was grown, and so much of an understanding of a whole other layer of God, and just the mystery that he really is in all of our lives. I think we all love a good mystery. And another, puzzle piece that just has to come together to keep us relying on faith and on the Lord. And so, yeah, through that came this other book that's been written, this Bible study, that's called Made Whole. And in it, I include just a lot that I personally walked through, personal tools that helped me and that I've put in there and just tried to word it the best that I can. And it comes with a video teaching series, because the way I wrote it, you can't really go through the Bible study without having the teaching to go with it. And so even the videographer, as he was doing the videos and listening to what I had to say, and then he did all the editing for me, he shared so many things, that God just began to speak to him that he had carried in his heart for so long.
Mm.
And so much healing came just for him through the video teaching, which was a beautiful thing. It's been really, really a blessing.
Oh my goodness, I'm tearing up. I'm trying not to cry from all of this. Just, oh my goodness. So, sorry. Um, what advice do you have for women who might be considering having an abortion?
The advice that I have is it's absolutely not worth it. I think for a lot of women, I did counsel one girl, and I was in this same place. They find themselves pregnant with a man's child that they don't want to spend the rest of their life with. And,
Mhm,
it's hard for them to imagine raising this other person's child, but this child is not this other person's child. This child is a child of God. And when I look at my beautiful babies, yes, I love my husband and
mhm,
he is the father of my children, but I don't look at my babies even now and think about that necessarily. They're individuals that God has created and raised up, and they have a purpose. And the other piece of advice that I would give, and this is where I found myself and another friend that I had a really good conversation with, both saw ourselves as this girl who, when we were younger, we didn't do bad things. We were like the good girl, we didn't do the drugs. We didn't have a bad reputation. Like, we
mhm,
thought other people saw us as the good girl. And so, if you find yourself pregnant, when we both found ourselves pregnant, it was kind of like that. It was like, but I can't be the girl that gets pregnant because I'm the good
mhm,
girl, right? Um, and that is such a selfish way to see it. It's also a lie, right? Because it's people pleasing, and it's worried about what other people think. But it's also a lie that, like, your parents are going to be really disappointed, and you're trying to hide, right? We're trying to hide because it's sin, and
mhm,
because it's not something that really, we know it. We know that we weren't supposed to be doing that, and that's really why we choose abortions, because we're trying to hide it. Just like Adam and Eve, they tried to hide from God in the garden, but God didn't shame them the same way that, your parents are most likely not going to shame you. And, I do know some women who they were kicked out of their house and they were shamed
mhm.
and they did find themselves in a really bad place with a baby coming. But my advice to someone who finds themselves in that place, especially, abortion is still not the answer. Abortion is the way out that seems to be easier. And in the short run, it will be easier, right? But in the long run, you have the opportunity to go on such an adventure with God. You will find yourself praying to God, and you will find yourself seeing miracle after miracle after miracle. And you will see God taking care of you when your heart is truly in a place of selflessness and saying, God, I cannot do this without you. And it all comes down, it really all comes down to our heart and what we want to choose. Do we want to choose to serve ourselves, or do we want to choose to serve a God who loves us so much that he sent his son to die for us? And, he does do what he says he will do. And that's the way we have to shift our perspective to see it that way, right? Like Mary saw miracle after miracle. Yeah, she went through hard
Mhm.
times, but she saw miracle after miracle after miracle, because she chose to rely on God instead of what her flesh wanted to say at the time.
Yeah. Well, my birth mom was 15 when she got pregnant, and it was one of those, she said, the one-time thing in, I think, a football field, and she put me up for adoption, and I'm very glad she did because, I've got a lot of struggles myself, but I'm trying to use them to help other people. And I mean, I have a beautiful daughter myself, and she's just a light in this world. And I know she's going to go on to do great things and to help other people. And if my birth mom had chosen that, then I wouldn't exist and my daughter wouldn't exist. So,
We're not just taking a life, we're taking a whole
right.
generations.
So, what advice do you have for women who have actually had abortions, but they regret their decision?
Yeah. First of all, I want to say, I'm sorry and I see you. For anyone who finds their self in that place of regretting it, trying to not think about it, reliving it over and over, or even to the one who is listening to this and has never even thought about it again, never looked back, that there is healing on the other side and there is forgiveness on the other side. And it's not something that God can't handle delicately. It's hard sometimes to face it. Like it's the last thing I ever wanted to think about once it happened, but it kept coming up. It wasn't going away. And so, you know, how are you going to deal with it is the choice that you have to make. And just remember, I just keep going back to the garden with Adam and Eve. He didn't come and shame them. He, in fact, sacrificed for them right then and there and clothed them and covered their shame. And, we're not in a place where God has to cover our shame anymore. We're in a place where Jesus totally abolished our shame on the cross.
Mhm.
Um, and so just asking Jesus questions, even asking a simple question like, where were you? I can see some women are like mad at God. Like, why did you allow that to happen? Why did you let me do that? Why didn't you stop me? And the the thing is that God is so much bigger than our choices here on earth. And he does have a perfect will, and he will work all things out for his good. And it's okay to be angry. It's okay to be angry at God. It's okay to be angry at yourself. It's okay to be angry at other people who helped you make this decision or drove you to the abortion clinic or didn't speak truth to you and say, you know, I'm sorry if there was not someone in your life who chose to empower you to be the mother that you could be. And another piece of advice is find help. There are lots of resources out there that can help you. Reach out to pregnancy centers. There's the healing study that I went through was called Surrendering the Secret. They have an online group and they can connect you to people in your area if you wanted to do something in person or online. I've led a few through those online studies as well, and they are always super helpful.
Yeah, I know my church has an abortion recovery group as well. So, and it sounds like these books and the study that you wrote might be really helpful too. So, Can you remind us what those are, where to find those, and let us know about your podcast and anything else anywhere else we can find you?
Yeah, absolutely. So you can find me at cassiehutton.com. The Made Whole Inner Healing book will release within this next month. So by February 9th, it'll be out and ready to go. And there's video teachings that go with it. You can order that on Amazon. Also, my personal testimony, Finding Freedom, A Personal Exodus from Deception to Identity, is also on Amazon. And I would encourage
Mhm,
your listeners to really consider the Made Whole Inner Healing Bible study, and not just because I had considered writing an abortion healing study, but
mhm,
for the woman who finds themselves choosing abortion, there is so much more going on in her life. And then if she did choose abortion, there's so much more going on in her life. So the Made Whole Inner Healing study is really encompassing body, soul, and spiritual healing from the womb to where you are now, from the time that from the memory and the stories you've been told from the time you were conceived all the way up until now, and helping you delicately and peacefully process a lot of these things. And then a lot of it, even I go into some scientific things of how certain illnesses are connected to, our fight or flight mode, and how the brain processes different traumas that we go through, and why we make stupid decisions when we're going through trauma,
mhm.
right? Because our logical brain is just not working.
Right,
And so allowing, in those moments, allowing yourself to find grace for yourself, as you weren't just being stupid, you literally were like shutting down.
right. Exactly. Yeah. I've had an episode about trauma and we talked about that. So it's definitely true. So thank you so much for coming on. Your story is beautiful.
Thank you so much for having me.
And you can find me at ithurtstomom.com and at It Hurts to Mom on Instagram and Facebook. And I'd love to hear from you via email at ithurtstomom@gmail.com. Hope everybody has a blessed day. Thank you.